I'm here to welcome you on behalf of the Olympic Peninsula Progressives to our Candidate Forum. We are a non-partisan political action group which emerged out of the 2016 presidential primary season. We continue to work on a lot of the same issues that brought us together during that presidential primary. And part of what we do is we are seeking candidates who share our values. Those candidates may not always be just one political party. And so we really wanted to have a nonpartisan gathering. And so we really are delighted that we have people from the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, and a variety of independents and other parties represented here today. So thank you all for coming. So the setup is that we invited all of the Clallam County District 3 Commissioner candidates, as well as the Clallam County PUD Commissioner candidates, and we're delighted that at least 4 of those people who came had agreed to come today, so thank you. We appreciate you accepting the invitation. In addition, we have a candidate for the U.S. Senate and a candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives that are also on their way here. One's coming from Tacoma, and the other one's coming from Fort Townsend. So, as you can see, we have kind of a packed agenda. For this reason, we have two people that help us with timekeeping. And so I'm just going to give you a little overview of how we're going to do this. Each candidate is going to have 10 minutes to speak in an uninterrupted way. So we're not going to we would prefer if you not ask questions of our candidates. Instead, we're going to have our question cards that some of our folks are going to be passing those question cards around if you haven't seen them. But if you have questions, if you could write it down, and only one candidate per card. Okay, so that in the end, we're going to give each candidate their cluster of cards. They can review their questions and then address the questions. So just wanted to give you an idea of how we're going to do this. For the candidates' sakes, we have signs that say we got 5 minutes left, and there's 1 minute left, and then when we want you to finish, please finish. So that's how we're going to handle our time frame. So I wanted to let you know that this event is being videotaped by PAPA. And for those of you who do not know what PAPA is, it's the Peninsula Area Public Access Cable TV. We want to thank Jordan Campbell, who is with us today. He's a high school senior, and he is going to be videotaping. And so we're really delighted he's here. I want to call your attention to the fact that if you would like to watch this event again, or you want to share it with your family, your friends, your neighbors, if you look at the agenda, towards the bottom up here, it's Papa Online TV, or papaonline.tv. Everybody see that on your agenda? It won't be up immediately, but Jordan, do we know about how long it will take before it gets up?
It should be up this weekend.
When?
This weekend.
This weekend, wow, okay. So look for it maybe Sunday night or Monday. Okay, so you can share it with other people or watch it again. Okay, so did everybody enjoy the Mexican food, those of you who ate? I want to tell you that this was from our friends out in the West End. We really wanted to help to support one of our small businesses out in District 3. And so this is one of the agendas, please. I did say which one. I'm not looking. Taqueria Santa Ana. Taqueria Santa Ana, yeah. And so they came out all the way from Forks to cater our event. We'll give you that. Thanks. All right. They make everything from scratch every morning. They're just an excellent Mexican restaurant. And while I'm thinking about commercials, we have someone here who's from the West End Co-op. Terry, you want to stand up? Terry Hellman's here, and I just want to give a shout out to another wonderful business in the West End. They make homemade soups, like 3 different types of soups every day, homemade, and wonderful sandwiches and salads. Okay, so thank you for being here. Okay. So maybe we can pass out the question cards right now. So Fred and Marie and Sheridan are going to help us pass out the question cards. Okay, you may want to take several because remember, it's only going to be one candidate per card. Okay, and if you need a pen, we have extra pens too. All right, and before we start, also want to point out the fact that there are people in this room who are running for PCO. Now, for those of you who don't know what PCO is, that's Precinct Committee Officer, and they have these in both the Republican and Democratic Party. And so I thought we would have everyone who is a candidate for PCO that would like to just at least stand up, would like to acknowledge you and thank you for running. And so while you're up, stay standing. While you all are up, do you want to please say what precinct you represent or which one you're running for?
Deer Park, 220.
You want to say your name?
Oh, Anina Richards.
Anina Richards, and she's running for Deer Park.
Yes, from the Democrat Party.
For the Democratic Party. Okay.
My name is Rachel Ringer. I am running as PCO from the Democratic Party. I'm in the Bellevue precinct, which is 205. That's out there by Gales Addition, for anybody that would like to know that area. I currently do a lot of walking canvassing. I go to many of the board meetings throughout Clallam County. I watch commissioner meetings online, so I'm very active in following through on different things. And I'm also the chair of the Clallam Progressive Coalition. The other thing I'd like to say too is tomorrow we're having a panel discussion. It is the Justice Panel. On there we have candidates that are also in here that will be there for sheriff, for the judges that are running for District Court 1, and the other one is for prosecuting attorney. We will also have a representative from the Port Angeles Police Department, and that will be representing the K-9 unit. Our moderator is Kim Davis, and you can get the information in the back.
Thanks, Rachel. And that's Norma?
Norma Turner, Mount Angeles, Democratic Party, and thank you for this amazing food. I have never been to a forum that had real food. You're at first.
And
I'm from 111, which is over just above the mill, and I'm not a Democrat. And this just tamales, really. I haven't had a tamale this good since I was down in Southern California.
Okay, great, thanks. Any other PCO candidates? Okay, I also want to note that, to be a PCO candidate, you have to be in one of the major political parties. There are a lot of other activists, maybe some are here today, who are with other political affiliations. So I just wanted to invite, is there anyone from the Green Party, the Socialist Party, the Libertarian Party, or the Democratic Socialists of America? Do we have any others of those activists here with us today, by chance? Okay, maybe not. Okay, but we do have independents here. A lot of the members of the Olympic Peninsula Progressives do consider themselves independents. So we have a number of those here today. Okay, so I think that's all the announcements. We're going to go ahead and start with, we're going to do this in alphabetical order. That means that Mike Doherty gets to be the first candidate to speak, and he has 10 minutes.
Thank you, and thanks for Rusty, for putting this on. I actually, impressed with this many people. I was very few people to show up because of the warmth of the day, need for water, if you're outside working. So thanks for coming. My name's Mike Doherty, and who's Mike Doherty? So for some of you, we've not met. So I was raised in Port Angeles, educated in Port Angeles, employed in Port Angeles. I worked in the mills, worked on the docks, worked in the backcountry of the park. It was a great childhood, a great young adulthood. I felt blessed. When I met my wife, Paula, she is right there. She's as shy as I am, but you can put your hand up. We've had 3 young sons, kind of average hooligans when they were younger, but they matured into wonderful jobs. 2 are engineers, computer engineers. Those 2 have MBAs paid for by their employers at Cal Berkeley and UCLA. So they've done well both in the field of IT, but also in management, small business in one case, large business in the other. And the 3rd son is in Eugene, Oregon. Right now he's in Russia because of the World Cup. He speaks 6 or 7 languages, and he learned Russian in a couple of months because of the World Cup. So we have healthy kids, healthy grandkids, so we feel blessed, and I credit part of that because of Clown County. In my younger life, I had an interest in government, partially because my father was interested in politics. He'd been a member of the state legislature at 21. His law school buddies ran him for the legislature from Pioneer Square down in that part of town, which was quite crazy in those days, late 30s, and West Seattle. And he ran a couple of terms. World War II came along, so he resigned. But he instilled in all of us kind of an interest in public service, but not necessarily a career. So he served a couple of terms and he resigned as prosecutor. He had done what he wanted to do. And my brother and I have reflected that a bit. You know, my brother John's retiring as a district court judge out in Forks. So there was a time when I was commissioner for a term. In fact, Ron Richards is here today. He served on the same board as me. When we built the new courthouse, for instance, a number of big projects, we paid cash, it came in on time. Then my wife and I kind of changed lives. When the 3rd son came along, we kind of negotiated that I would be a house husband and sit with the boys, go to school with the boys, main volunteer with the boys in school, and I'll always revere those years. They're probably the most fun years and the most maturing years for a young parent who's heavily involved in schools. And then each season with baseball, t-ball, y-ball, soccer, skiing, whatever, I was always coaching something. So with our boys in their staggered ages, it was probably over 20 years I coached all those youth sports by season. When I graduated from Port Angeles High School, I'd gone off in the Navy and then come back. I taught 20 years at Peninsula College in business law and American government. So I had kind of an academic side to government also. But then I had worked in the legislature a couple sessions in bill drafting, and then I worked 2 times for our senior senator at that time. He was chairman of a U.S. Senate Commerce Committee, eventually became chairman of Appropriations, Warren Magnuson. And after my 2nd time working with him, they offered me a full-time job. Paul and I had a discussion. We really wanted to raise a family in a place like Port Angeles, so I gave that up. And we came out and bought a couple of houses over the years. We've restored a couple of historic houses. And I think we've had a wonderful experience as a family. So several generations, and again, I credit that to the community. Part of my emphasis during the years teaching at Peninsula College was about consumer protection. So the average person, consumer law, trying to get safeguards for consumers, that was kind of the emphasis. And it was, in those days, I think it was U.S. News World Report used the phrase news you can use. So every class we'd have this segment on news you could use, and it was more of a consumer protection emphasis. So besides the short term, 1 term in the 70s, and then in 99 I ran for commissioner again, and I served until 2014. Most of those years, I think my record reflects good leadership, a lot of experience in different areas, and solid results. There were times when, like the recession, a challenge came to county government and other governments. And the best Jim Jones could find out was that we were of only 1 or 2 counties in the state that were not on debt service at the time, or on warrants. So it was quite an achievement, but at the same time, not only did we do some things that kept county government afloat, pretty much the normal employment without having to let a lot of employees go, but we also did some progressive things because we had a pretty solid reserve in the general fund. And more importantly, in those days, the road fund, which is a totally separate fund, had a reserve. So while other counties were in trouble financially, we had reserves. So we got far more than our share of the grants that were available for road projects. Elwha Bridge, $20 million project, largest construction project in the history of Cobb County government. And so we had money that we could match for grants. So many, many times we came out ahead in categories of grants that were competitive when other counties couldn't apply because they didn't have the match. So I think it was sound fiscal management that paid out a number of different ways. Also, when I get going with a little bit is on this handout that's in back, but I think I probably pride myself a lot in being elected by my peers through the Association of Counties or the governors, Gregoire, Locke, Inslee, appointing me to different committees to represent either all Washington counties or at least rural Washington counties on a number of boards. So there's the State Interoperability Executive Committee, and I represent all the counties on that. The State Broadband Board represented the counties on that. The Criminal Justice Treatment Account Panel, which represents the drug treatment money for alcohol and drug abuse, and I represent the counties on that. Justice Administration Board, that's drug courts, drug task forces. I was on the planning committee statewide to set up the drug court. So a number of experiences where peers elected me to represent them on behalf of all the counties in Washington, or the governor did that. On the budget, the state budget, Governor Gregoire, when she went in office, she created a budget transformation committee. She appointed me as the only elected local government official to be on that committee. We went around the state holding public meetings, eventually hearings, to try to figure out a way to make the state budget transform, one, into a better business model, but also trying to represent rural Washington. So that's why she appointed me, and at times before we go into the meeting, she'd give me a little coaching before we'd walk out there, and she had one or two messages she wanted brought up, if I felt comfortable, on behalf of rural counties, because they were initiatives that she wanted to propose to the legislature or use the discretionary money that the governor has. So that experience, I think, taught me a lot. I didn't ask for most of those appointments, but I was flattered when I got them. So I had the confidence of peers across the state. There were a number of other issues that we get into with question and answer, but for instance, things like broadband. I'd say for 15 years I've tried to champion broadband in rural Washington. There was a time when Senator Murray and I were out on 101 when the line was put in across from 112 on the Forest Service Road to make redundant, mostly buried cable. Not all of it was. 2 were still microwave relays, but we had redundant broadband. And so things like that were an achievement. And by doing those sorts of things with senators, governors, there were times when you build a little rapport, and I just don't see the current board doing that now. When Locke was governor, he asked me to work on his campaign, represent him up here, and I said, well, if you'll come up and visit Clallam County once a year, I'll gladly do that, Governor. And I met him in the House when he was chair of the Appropriations Committee in the House. He's a very sharp budget guy. So I did, and he kept his promise. He actually came 9 times in 8 years, and so I got to advance all of those trips. So he was the kind of guy that wanted to make lots of stops. So when you do that, you build a little rapport with the governor, senators, and you can call on them later when you need their help. So there were times when the $6 million OPSCAN, the Olympic Peninsula, the interoperable communication system. We had a $6 million grant. We made it through 2 hurdles. There was 1 hurdle left. And the governor's staff, quite a ways down the food chain, wanted to give that grant to Tukwila because they have a lot of sales tax. They didn't think we could maintain that. So I called one of the governor's staff and said I needed a meeting with the governor. So that night I went down, we met into the night, and the governor turned around that grant. So Clallam County got that grant. So I'm proud of the experience I had being appointed by peers, work on various committees, and I'll probably mention more during the question period. But also showing some leadership for Clallam County. And by being on those committees and having established some trust and confidence of elected officials, senators, and governors, I was able to get not just Clallam County its share, but usually a little bit more. And again, possibly it was because of our reserve, but very likely it helped having a trust relationship with senior elected officials because they wanted to make sure if we got grants, if we got some discretionary money to do something, we would deliver. They don't want to be embarrassed on projects. So I'm proud of my record. I'd ask for your vote, and hopefully we'll have some tough questions during the question and answer period. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Doherty. And so we're going to gather the questions for him. If you have a question, if you can put your hand up, and either Fred or Marie are going to go gather those questions, and then I'll take those questions. Yes. Maybe you'll think of more questions next time. Okay. More questions yet?
We need more time to write it down.
Oh, okay. All right, this one. Okay, we'll go on. Okay, so next we have Mr. Bill Peach. Okay, I'll reiterate how we're going to do the Q&As. Okay, so each candidate gets 10 minutes to speak, uninterrupted, and then we're going to gather the questions, and they're going to get their cluster of questions at the end, and we're going to have a panel, and they will have five minutes to answer or to discuss their questions. And then the next part of it, I'm sorry about the static. Anything we can do about that? Okay. We invited at least the county commissioner candidates to ask each other one question during panel time. We thought that would be kind of interesting because we know that the candidates know each other the best. So we'll be doing that. And then if we have time, we have also Mr. Waddell who's going to be speaking. So by 7 o'clock, we have to go on to the next segment of our gathering where the Senate and House of Representative candidates are going to speak. So we should hopefully have some time for people to have direct interaction with the candidates. But in the interest of time, this is how we're going to do it. So we appreciate you writing your questions down. Okay, so Mr. Peach, I'm ready for you now.
That was a nice meal. Thanks very much. And I certainly appreciate the opportunity to learn from you today. I'm currently the County Commissioner, District 3, and I appreciate the fact that you gave me this privilege. Running for re-election because I really and truly believe I can build on the work that has been accomplished in the last couple of years. Now, I'm not your typical candidate. In fact, Dale, what did I bring you to this meeting?
Marijuana.
Marijuana. I don't even know how to spell it, sir. But I did bring Dale his election, one of his signs. And actually, Mike, if ever you're wondering about the next meetings, feel free to call the office, certainly, 2233. I'm very transparent about my schedule and all the bookings and stuff that we have coming up for the candidates. And then you can call and say, Bill, you forgot about, I'm very, very interested in collaboration, and I practice it. And the two things that have worked really well for the county commissioners are transparency and collaboration. It generates results, but I'll tell you what, the feedback I get when I talk to a lot of the staff, and in the last couple of years, the commissioners meet individually. We don't directly operate through Jimmy Jones. We get firsthand feedback. The feedback I get is that the staff have a better understanding of what is occurring, and they see the commissioners getting along. In fact, in some cases, the comments are, this commission gets along better than commissions in the past. And that's nothing to do with your leadership, Mike. I think it's everything to do with people that are starting fresh. There's no, gosh, I remember 5 years ago, this happened and that happened. There's none of that baggage being carried. And I'll tell you, when I originally ran for this position, I wanted to know, what are the key issues that are going on? And it took a lot of work to actually dig up information about where we are financially and what are the issues. Today, I've worked really hard to make sure that the next person doesn't have anywhere near that. You can get onto the county's website and look at it. all of the budget and actual information, and you can look at the cost center, say the sheriff's department, and look at overtime. I got a call one time. How come you're spending so much money on the overtime? Well, actually, I hate to tell you this, but it was because we had vacancies, and some of the people couldn't pass a drug test. That's kind of a good idea, except for Dale, he wants the marijuana and all of never mind. But that was the issue, and so it was a good question by a member of the public that said, well, wait a minute now, it looks like you're headed in the direction of overspending. So we've got a lot of transparency, combine that with the fact that we've now got all of our meetings that are videoed. You go back when someone says, I remember last month, last year, and you can verify that yourself at your leisure. I believe there's a lot of merit to that. You know, a lot of people believe that you can have your own opinion about what is occurring. But the facts, there's only one set of facts. And that, to me, is very important. Make sure that you put your hands on the facts. Let me talk about a couple of things that I'm really proud of in the first term that I've been able to serve. I have a member of the hospital's board of directors approached me just recently. And they said, you know, Val, I really do appreciate the way you connect with the community. Mike knows you can put on some real miles, okay? It's 56,000 miles on a car that's just a little over 12 months. But she said, you know what, I like the fact that you're engaged with us, and I also like the fact you don't push your agenda on us. It's not a party agenda. And then she asked me one of the things that I really appreciated hearing. What party are you with? And so I do believe that I personally am not happy about what I see in Washington, D.C. The way the lack of cooperation and collaboration takes place. And I think we're headed in the direction of a new paradigm. There's nothing wrong with working together. No one has a patent on the good ideas, and if you open your mind, a lot of good things can happen. But you've got to make sure that your mind is open. So I do see some accomplishments that were made in how the commissioners are working together. Morale is the highest it's been in quite a long time. And because of that, here's something I didn't really realize until I looked into it, but about a third of our staff are new in the last couple of years, and it's because the economy started to recover, and people felt more comfortable going ahead and retiring. If you think about that, out of 350 FTEs, 400 people total, a third are new. So there's a lot of rookie mistakes that are being made. We're not used to that. We've got people 25 years, 50 years. You know, they don't get lost in the office or any of that sort of thing. So we are actually able to work together and share information and share workload. And I think a lot of that has to do with the departments, with what the commissioners are doing. And we'll sit down and we'll have serious debate on any issue. One Republican, one Democrat, one Independent. It doesn't make any difference what party you're in. 95% of the work that I do has nothing to do with the party. It's the process of managing the business here in Clallam County. So a couple of things that I'd like to work on in the next couple of years. Number one, Mike, you're proud of the bridge. I'm real proud of the fact that we got the Carlsberg sewer taken care of. We're looking forward to taking care of the Clallam Bay sewer. It sounds simple, but I'll tell you what, there's a lot of work that goes into it, a lot of planning that goes into it. I'm looking forward to more conversations and solutions about the homeless issue. This has been with us for a long time. If you'll take time to go out to those homeless camps, you'll probably find someone new. And there's part of the issue. It's a part of our society that we're comfortable turning our head to. That has to change. We have to have some awareness. Another issue that I put my hand in the air on 4 years ago dealt with the issue of the opioid epidemic, okay? And at the time, it was nowhere near as widely covered as it is today, but I took some advice, and in order for change to occur, you have to bring it out and be open about it. So some of the things that I've seen us do, number one is that it is okay to have that conversation. A fellow by the name of Harry Gazdick provides services to individuals as a public defender. He and I had a conversation with, gosh, that cost center has gone from $400,000 a year 10 years ago to $1.5 million now. I can't touch that cost center. All the changes are a result of unfunded mandates. So I tried to adapt to the situation. What can we do to change the total amount of money that's spent? And I asked Harry. And Harry said, well, it's simple. Don't put people in jail. I said, well, you know what? I'm not endorsing anarchy. You got to help me with some more information. And what he really meant was, if you look at our system, a lot of those people need other care and services, mental health, mental illness, other types of addiction could be alcohol. But what I have found is that working with the drug court provides an opportunity for the individual that does want to change to find a group that they can collaborate with, people that reinforces the behavior that they want to head in the direction of. So I'm also interested in taking a look at the challenges we face in affordable housing. And here's the answer to all of those. I'm not going to solve it individually. It will take a board that works together. And I want you to know that it's something that I believe in, and we got a track record for it. So I'm really interested in your questions. And again, thank you very much. Have me over.
Thank you very much, Mr. Peach. Okay, so next, if you have any questions for Mr. Peach, we're going to gather those questions now. Come on, put your hand up and we'll gather those questions. And we shall prepare for our next candidate, Belle Wilson.
Thank you. John, can you do this all right?
Yeah.
Is it distorted at all?
It's a little bassy.
Basically, okay, we'll do the same time. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm just going to sit here and enjoy 10 minutes uninterrupted for a second. I was the seventh son, and I never got 7 seconds uninterrupted. And then I got married, and I never had 7 or 10 minutes uninterrupted since then. I'm just going to enjoy this. If there's some long pauses, it's just because I'm enjoying being uninterrupted. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I was born in Texas. I was the 7th son. My dad was a welder, and he had conflict management issues. He was an alcoholic, and then may have added some to it. He was an excellent welder, and he would travel up and down the Gulf Coast and work with shipbuilding entities. And when anybody criticized his work, he would just punch them and go to the next one. And so we lived in about 18 different places before I ever started school. So that's not the preferred way to handle conflict. I learned that early. And as you might guess, it wasn't too long before we moved away from the coast and moved back to where my dad grew up in Yellowbush County, Mississippi, not too far from the hometown of William Faulkner. And we lived there in kind of a sharecropper shack, and we really could see chickens scratching around underneath the floor from the living room. So that's what most of the sharecroppers that lived in Mississippi at that time experienced. We finally moved out of there and moved to the edge of Memphis. And this was great because all of these kids that had spent most of their time chopping cotton for $2 a day and picking cotton for 2 cents a pound, we were anxious to get out of that environment. So when Dad did get a good job and moved to the edge of Memphis, we were in hog heaven. In fact, it was just shortly after that, I got my first paper route. I threw the commercial appeal in the mornings in Memphis, and I threw the press senator in the afternoon. And those were long routes. I had 150, 200 on each route. And so I actually got to read the papers. And that gave me a lifelong interest in newspapers, journalism, and what they contribute to a community. So it wasn't too long before the parents separated, divorced. And so I went to live with Mom for a couple of years, and then finally Mom farmed us out to a foster home. So I spent from about the grade from 11 years old to graduation from high school in a foster home. And it's the best thing that ever happened to me because it was an excellent school. We had opportunities to go the college route or the trade route, and I tried to ride the middle and do both of those. So I tried to learn as much as I could about trades and industry, and I also tried to learn the difference between a metaphor and a tubaphor. And it served me well. During my senior year in high school, I caught the attention of one of the senators with a letter I had written to him about some things that were on my mind. At 18 years old, you think that they're going to just flip right over and take care of your issues. Well, we opened a dialogue and we exchanged several letters, and then he invited me to come and be a page in the Tennessee State Legislature. And I did, and so that opportunity, I would go on Tuesday mornings and go to the Capitol building Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday mornings and come back Friday night or Friday afternoon. So that meant I had Monday and Friday afternoon to catch up my studies, which I did, and graduated on time. But during this time at the legislature, it's where I learned the importance and the value of electoral politics. There was 95 counties, believe it or not, in Tennessee, and so each of those seemed to have sent 2 or 3 or 4 representatives, not that many, but it seemed like it. But they didn't get in until noon, and the pages got there at about 9:30. So after we got the bills collated and dispersed around, I would go and prop my feet up on their desk and read their hometown newspaper. And then later in the day or later in the week, they'd be out in the coffee shop or walking along, and I would go and mention something nonchalantly about an issue that was happening in their hometown. It amazed a lot of them that this page that was local here, but he knew what was going on in Johnson City, which is 400 miles away. So that kind of got me in good stead. So the last half of that career as a page, they put me in as Sergeant at Arms. Now what that meant, and also that same year, they passed a law which made 18-year-olds adults. That was a bad idea. But by that time, I was a Sergeant at Arms, which meant I got to go down to the package store and get liquor for the senators and the representatives, and they would go in the cloakroom and pour themselves a drink and go back out on the floor. So, enough of that. I got interested in being a businessman, and I did open a construction company. I worked at that for 15 years, and then I went back and got my master's degree, thought I would be good at teaching, and I did. I taught at the college level for about 10 years. I taught communication-based classes, including conflict resolution, believe it or not. So I did have a lot better chance at conflict resolution the book way than my dad did his way. But also we learned team building, and we learned the important aspects of team building, about listening to the other people and listening to what matters to them, and not only listening to what they're saying, but listen to what they're not saying, the nonverbal communication. So I think I became reasonably skilled at that, and we were very successful at the team building part. In industry, we would try to decide those things that we wanted to improve and those things we would measure. So whatever you want to improve, you want to measure. So that brings me around to more current. When I got to Port Angeles, I started looking, well, we came here to retire. And about the second month of retirement, my wife and I were having breakfast one morning, and she said, here's what I think about retirement. I've got twice as much husband and half as much income. And then she finished up by saying, you need to get a job. And I went out and surveyed the job landscape at that time, at my age, and there really wasn't anything there. So I thought, I'm going to have to create my own job. And that's when I launched the Protocol News. And my goal for that was, I was concerned about the unemployment and the average income in the community, which was right at minimum wage. And so I thought, okay, if I can help these mom and pop shops with a affordable advertising mechanism and maybe get some information out there, some good articles, then I might be able to help the local economy. And the first thing I did was I wanted to buy local, right? So I contracted with Sound Publishing to have them publish my newspaper. And that was a big mistake. They would agree that they were going to publish or print it and bring it back, and they were going to bring it to the dock, and I could come down at 3 o'clock in the morning and pick it up. Well, they called me on the last day, the last hour before Friday, 5 o'clock Friday, when they were supposed to deliver it Sunday. Said, no, we're not going to deliver it to the daily paper's office. We're going to drop it by your house, and we give you your address. And so 3 o'clock Sunday morning, I was waiting and waiting and waiting, and my paper didn't arrive. So I ran down to the newspaper dock, and there was a kindly old gentleman finally answered the door, let me in. We looked all over that warehouse, which is very large, and in the very back part, and under a tarp, and under a tire, I found my pallet full of my first issue of Protocol. That taught me a little bit about trying to shop at home with your competitors. So fast forward to, I think I'm a pretty sensible guy. The reason I started that paper, another reason I started that paper, was I tried to get a letter to the editor published in the paper, and the publisher at that time, John Brewer, called me up and said, well, if you'll take out this, this, and this, we'll publish it. And I said, well, that's the meat of the matter. I don't want to take that out. It won't mean anything. Well, it's your call. Click. And so then, a little bit later, I went down to KONP, and I had been in radio back in Tennessee, and I wanted to buy 1 hour a day, 5 days a week for 6 months to have a radio call-in show so that people could call in and give their opinions on things that are going on. And then they said they didn't want to sell 6 months of advertising ahead of time. So what I realized was that the media here is pretty well controlled. Then I went over to the county commission while I was a reporter and wanted to give evidence on or testimony on a grant that was about to go out. And usually when you have public comment period, you get 3 minutes, but on a hearing, I've never seen them call time on it. So I got about 30, 45 seconds into my time, and the chairman at the time was not Commissioner Peace, but they called time on me. So I did the sensible thing. When I couldn't get a letter to the editor, I started a newspaper. When I couldn't get on the radio, I helped get a television station started. And when I couldn't bring the public's voice to the county commission, I decided to run for the county commission. When I'm elected, I will do my best to see that nobody is ever stymied when they bring the important information that the county commissioners need to make their important decisions. You're the ones paying for this, county government. You have every right to be heard.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. All right, so if anybody has questions for Dale Wilson, if you want to put your hand up and we'll gather the questions. Do you have a question about the procedure? Yeah.
I don't know if I can ask the question now, I can write it.
No, we would like you to write the question down and be sure to put the candidate's name on the top, okay? And so, Bill and Marie are gathering these questions and we're going to separate them out. And as soon as we have them all separated out, we're going to give each of the candidates their cluster. But before they have the panel, we're going to have our next speaker. So we have one of the two candidates for PUD Commissioner, Mr. Jim Waddell, is going to be speaking next. So, Mr. Waddell.
Well, it's great to be here, and I appreciate the progressives for inviting me and giving me a chance to talk. I'm not from this area. I'm from the East Coast, and since I don't know anybody, I guess I better tell you a little bit about who I am and where I came from and what I've been doing all my life. I'm the son of an Air Force officer, and so we moved all over the East Coast and Europe and so forth. And I ended up actually going to the Citadel Military College and graduated with a degree in civil engineering, and was immediately scooped up by an outfit called the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I didn't mean to do that. My dad warned me about the Corps of Engineers all the time I was growing up about how much money they wasted and made life miserable for him and made life miserable for the Air Force. Anyway, I ended up spending 35 or so years with the Army Corps of Engineers and had a lot of different jobs. Did construction management, design work, learned a lot about just about everything in the Corps, military construction, civil works, that's the dams and harbors and so forth. But I guess the reason I'm here now is a couple of things. One is I got, for some reason, pretty good at figuring out how much things cost and how to do them a lot cheaper and a lot quicker. And I kind of developed a reputation for solving tough problems like that and was frequently asked to take on tougher and tougher assignments and eventually moved from the field assignments that I was in all the way up the ranks in Europe and then to Washington, D.C., and even did a stint in the first Bush White House as a senior policy for the environment in the Office of Science and Technology Policy for a few months. So I've got a broad range of fixing stuff on the ground, whether it's a military base, infrastructure, that kind of stuff, or dealing with water resource projects and hydropower and that kind of thing, all the way up to senior policy positions in government. And so, but one of the jobs that I guess the second reason that I ended up where I am at this moment is that I was assigned as the Deputy District Engineer for programs in Walla Walla, Washington, back in about 1999 to 2002. And it just so happened at that time when I got there, we were trying to wrap up a $33 million study on some dams out there. And in the process of that, I learned a lot about hydropower. I'd done dams before on the East Coast, but nothing like big hydro projects. And so I started learning about how much these things cost. And I was really blown away because for two things. One, they're very expensive. The other thing is nobody knows they're very expensive. It's just sort of one of these things that the Corps and Bureau of Reclamation and Environmental Power just kind of keep going and going, but they never really look at what these things cost. And so that's what I started doing, started being very concerned about what I was seeing in terms of expensive hydro projects. And what we were seeing is that my job was to then go get budgets for all kinds of hydro projects. And I was seeing that some dams were very, very expensive to operate, whereas others were less expensive. But because of the government's financial situation, all of them were short of funds. And so the question became to be, why are we investing in projects that are basically harming the taxpayers from a financial standpoint at the expense of other projects, in this case hydro projects, that were doing a good job? So anyway, I retired about 8 or 9 years ago. Got rehired 3 times by the Corps of Engineers to work with the Environmental Protection Agency, and actually did big community visioning for them. That's a specialty that I developed for the government, and actually did 3 communities here in Port Angeles, 2 before I ever moved here to Port Angeles from Atlanta, Georgia, where I was last stationed. And so what I would do is work with communities and get them to literally draw out their vision of how they saw themselves living sustainably in the future. And from those hand-drawn visions, worked with an artist and came up with composite renderings. And so we did this. Bill mentioned the Carlsberg Sewer, and that was actually one of the initiatives that I was asked to help solve and bring the community together with this visioning process. And so we worked on that at Carlsberg. Also did the similar process at Clown Bay and CQ, and then with the Macaw tribe out at Nia Bay. So that was a whole different world of working with people, getting their ideas on paper, their visions, and seeing where they wanted to go, and trying to build resilience in community, sustainability, and a really powerful feeling of connection to the community and the place, nature, and so forth. So it kind of sounds weird for an engineer to be talking about that kind of stuff, but I was doing that along with, figuring out how much dams cost. Now, so, just a sort of an odd twist of fate happened about 7 or 8 years ago, and I ended up making some comments about dams that environmental groups were talking about, and my comments actually got caught up on film. I didn't realize I did film. They got put into a documentary, and then I got asked to make a presentation, and before I do it, I was telling people about hydro projects all over again, but I felt like I really needed to do my homework since I'd been out of hydro for about 15 years, and so For the last 4 or 5 years, I've spent thousands of hours on my own, basically trying to pick apart why these dams are so expensive and which ones ought to be getting money. And I guess the thing that was the toughest was I was told to stay away from Bonneville Power Administration. They're the gorilla here, and you don't mess with Bonneville. And I listened to that for a few years, but I realized, you know what? That you can't ignore these people. That's a big organization, and they are controlling our destiny in terms of power and so forth. And so I started digging into Bonneville's books. And what I was discovering is not just 4 dams, but the entire hydro system is basically underfunded. It's a lot more expensive than people realize. And Bonneville is in serious financial trouble. And I was seeing this, and I was trying to explain this to some of our elected officials, and made some visits to folks in this room. Tried to get in to see Governor Inslee and Senator Murray and warn them of this. And oh, by the way, there was also salmon issues on 4 that were all these dams, but the 4 that I was looking at also had important salmon issues that are critical today. And for you guys that fish for salmon, you know what I'm talking about. They simply aren't there, and they're just about to disappear. Well, I was having a hard time getting people to listen to me, but finally, the ice was sort of, or the lid was blown off this thing when about last March. Elliot Meinzer, if you know who he is, I know who Elliot Meinzer is. He's the administrator of the Bonneville Power Administration. He is one person who probably has more influence, or not more, but a lot of influence over your income because what he does affects our power rates. And what he said was, in front of the Northwest Power and Conservation Council, who are elected oversight people, he was describing Bonneville's financial crisis. And he said this: if there's an axis of nonchalance on one end, to panic on the other, I think it's important that we don't get into a panic mode. I'm not in a panic mode, but I'm in a very, very significant sense of urgency mode. Well, I don't know about you guys, but when I heard that, first off, it vindicated what I had been seeing and trying to tell people. But the other 2 things about it: one, nobody reported that in the press. I doubt any of you guys heard that. The other thing is that might be one of the most important things anybody's said in the last 20 years in the Pacific Northwest. Because if Bonneville is in that kind of serious trouble, and we as a PUD are paying for that power, and our rates are going up, this is what in a business sense is called a death spiral. And what has happened is Bonneville is basically, Bonneville is a marketing agency, and we forget that. They do not operate these dams. The 2 federal agencies, the Corps of Engineers and Bureau of Reclamation, 2 different federal agencies operate them. Bonneville markets the power. And as a marketing agency, they're salesmen, salespeople. And what they do to our PUDs is try to sell hydropower at the expense of anything else. That's their number 1 objective. They also operate the grid. They do a pretty good job with that, although that's underfunded as well. So my concern was going to our PUD commissioner meetings and listening and trying to explain this to them, that the amount that we pay for power is 2/3 of your power bill. And what I was saying is that if we can't get control of Bonneville and can get their costs under control, then we as a PUD are failing. And the other thing about this is that there is so much power out there today that the hydropower, there's surplus is unbelievable. And so we have renewable energy like wind and solar coming online, especially out of California. This is driving the wholesale price of power down. And yet our PUDs, and I talked to Canidates and a few others, and they're looking at how do we get access, how do we get into that open market power? Because if we were just to get 20% of our power, get our PUD out of the open market as opposed, in addition to the rest of it from BPA, that alone would probably reduce our power rates for 10%. So what I plan on doing is kind of work on this, work internally with the cost issues there. They're big too. You've got to look at some stuff there, but it's a combination of the internal cost management and control, and also looking at how much we pay for power and where we get it from and what we're going to do about it. Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Liddell, you can sit up here, since we're going to have a panel, and we'll have the other candidates come up. And what I found out is that these 3 people who wanted every candidate to answer their questions. So we're gonna let the candidates maybe first start with the cluster of questions that they got. And we're gonna time this a maximum of 5 minutes per candidate. And Jim, you'll go last, because we're still gathering your questions.
I can ask one question.
You can ask one. Okay. Does anybody have, yes, a show of hands for any more questions for Jim or any of the other candidates? We'll gather those right now. Okay. Okay, again, others for all 4 candidates. Okay. Yes. Each candidate gets 5 minutes at maximum to answer their cluster of questions. Some got more questions than others. So let's see, I guess we're going alphabetical order again. Mr. Doherty.
The first question is, what would I do about homelessness? That's been a long time concern of mine. Early on in the session, probably 12 or so years ago, I testified on behalf of Suffix County and myself in favor of the 2 bills that are the sources of revenue now for homelessness, and they're tied to recording fees that come through the auditor's office. And Bill's aware of this. They distribute the money. The commissioner set up where it's going to go after taking applications. And it's a fairly unique process that we established in Clallam County, and then other counties copied us. So I was there when the 2 funds were created. I went a couple of times when they were withdrawn, when the recession came and the state was a little desperate for money. One of the things I did, I went and talked to Senator Mark Malosha, who was the prime sponsor of that legislation. It's a real soft spot for homeless folks. And he represented the district in West Seattle and a couple other areas that my father had represented. So we had a little bit of a trust there. And I used that to help give him some examples of rural areas that needed some help with homelessness. So that was concerning. I have some other suggestions, and the main one is that I hope that if elected, I will talk to the city governments in Clallam County about them accompanying me to Columbia and setting up a new program, somewhat like Future Builders was in our county, where young folks are taught carpentry skills. Well, I think we need some skills being taught on how to go in and save housing that's going into foreclosure, or where people are not, they can see foreclosure coming. Keep the heat on so you don't get mildew into the wallboard, you don't get deterioration of the house. But try to save it. Banks don't want to own those houses. Once they're decaying, the realtors don't particularly want to sell them. So to get people to get more money out of their investment in their house, help the real estate economy, help people that are homeless now. It's a little bit like the sweat equity program, where you can put those up for sale. You can have skills taught. You can have people on contract, maybe retired contractors, to work on those houses. It's working in some other counties. In one county, Island County, had a program called Giraffe, Stick Your Neck Out. They were buying old housing stock, which formerly had been demolished on the bluffs around Whidbey Island. They moved it back, put it on some tax title property or other reduced cost property, put it on blocks, put it up for auction, and retirees, low-income folks are buying those houses. They've done 13 last time I checked. So that's a solution. The city should be involved in my first proposal because they have built streets, water, sewer systems, electrical, telecom in place. So they could have people in those houses that are now looking like they're abandoned quicker, use those utilities and make some revenue off those utilities, and people can get into those houses with just some technical assistance. I think it would work. So if elected, I'd go down and talk to Mark Malosha, talk to our legislators, probably Kilmer, the kinds of people I have connections with, and get them to buy into this program. And then maybe we all go down to Commerce, with some other departments and the government, get them aboard and try to get this instigated as a solution.
Has he finished his 5 minutes yet? You started.
Thanks. So why didn't I attend the Rotary meeting that was reported in the paper? We had a couple of websites set up, and emails had gone to a site that we weren't monitoring, to be honest. And I learned actually from Dale Wilson that there was a meeting the next morning, and I emailed back the next day, and I asked Dale by email, what's the program? He emailed back 3 words, Peach, you and I. He didn't say where the meeting was, what time it was. So I get up in the morning, I look at the emails for Dale's answer, and I tried to figure out where the meeting was. There were 2 Rotaries. Maybe it was one of those. One met at 7 a.m. So anyway, I apologized to the Rotary. I asked them to send a link to my website, which is on the green card back there. And then I asked if there was a possibility to get some time, even 5 minutes, to come to a subsequent Rotary meeting, apologize, give maybe some information on myself, and answer any of their questions, linger after meeting answer questions. So I look forward to more and more meetings. We weren't monitoring that email address. The other question was, why did you decide to run for commissioner again? I know the potential of this job, and I just don't see the current board acting as we used to as a team. We got a lot more done, many more projects. We handled more issues in a month than the current board handles in 6 months. So we were just more active. I questioned some of Bill's transparency. Meeting at 7:30 in the morning, to me, is absurd. The courthouse isn't even open until a half hour, an hour later. Now they say there's a side door open. Let's meet when it's convenient. My wife and I worked in the 1970s to get the Open Public Meeting Act, the Public Records Act, and campaign disclosure. I stand for more transparency than there is now. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, are there any more questions? Anybody put their hands up there? Any more written questions that were gathering to the candidates? Okay, I guess we've got them all. Okay, next we're going to permit Mr. Beach to answer his questions for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mike. I thought you were going to negotiate 5 minutes per question. No, that's the direction.
That's what I thought.
That's the direction he was headed. A couple of easy ones. Someone's asking me about what brand of dye I use for my hair. It's the same one I use. Another question is if I disagree with the Republicans, what they're doing in Washington, D.C., why did I sign up as a Republican? My disagreement is just with the Republicans. It's with everybody that won't cross the aisle, that won't talk to each other. That's the issue that I have. Why did I sign up with the Republicans? I'm a conservative individual. I believe in less government, not more, less taxes, not more. But I mostly agree with the philosophy of the party. I decided to use that mostly agree part when I was asked a question about abortion and learned that my views weren't the same as a bunch of the people that were sitting in the room with me from the Republican parties. But I felt it was better that they knew what I thought. And my answer was, women are not chattel. So I got a couple of questions here on the idea of the homelessness. The issues that we ended up this year with, more than twice the amount of money being requested than was available. And that's an increase in the amount of requests. So one of the things that you're going to see taking place in the next couple of months is, first we want to answer the question, what's the total dollars that come into Cologne County? Total, every source. And then we want to look at the history of those dollars. I'm suspicious that some of those funding sources have decreased. After we've got the networks in progress, we're expecting the homeless task force to give us some information about mid-August. After that information is available, then we want to take a look at where is the duplication and where are the gaps. After that is done, we'll take a look at priorities. So, the tough question we have to answer is, shall we support the lady that's 90 who now lives in her car because she can't afford her apartment in Swim, or shall we support the 6-month-old child that needs milk desperately? Now, the commissioners aren't going to answer that question alone. Our approach is to listen, and it actually comes from some research. If you take a look at successful homelessness programs in the U.S., what is common among the ones that are successful is that their programs are tailored to the community and their grassroots programs. So we're gonna do some research, we'll identify our priorities, and that is where we'll go out. Mike was talking about Senator Hargrove's legislation. That's that funding resource that we work with. But we're gonna take that work and use that as criteria with which to evaluate the applications that come in. Another question is, was the $50,000 that, I was the one that made the motion when Serenity House came in and said, we're running out of money. That was a tough decision on my part because we just finished this protocol. People put in all of their applications. Serenity House received $240,000 out of 400 available. And then this knothead goes and gives them another $50,000 and totally circumvents the process. And I expected to take a lot of flack on that. But I knew that their need was real. And as we see today, that right now, the only thing that they have done to adapt is simply stop spending. I've met with them a number of times, and I'll share something with you. Look at their annual report. They are desperately requesting help from people that understand financial management. If you can spend a little time with that kind of a resource with them, they really would appreciate it if you'd stop by and give them a hand.
Thank you. All right, next is Mr. Wilson, and I'm going to add, as an observation, somebody wanted all three candidates to address homelessness, and in particular, how can extreme poverty be solved in Clallam County? So I don't know if either of you have any additional comments on that. I do want to think about that while we let Mr. Wilson talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Please forgive me if I stand up. I think better on my feet. First question. Do you support adopting Port Angeles plastic bag ordinance for Clallam County? No. One of the reasons I lived in Arizona for a while, and if you've ever seen a saguaro cactus completely covered with plastic bags blowing in the wind, it's a terrible sight. I don't want to see that in Clallam County. And I reuse all my plastic bags and I miss them when I don't have them. Second question, what's your problem with Bill Peach continuing as commissioner? Well, I'm glad you asked that. Let's go back. I've heard Bill speak 3 or 4 times now in public, and he keeps hitting some of the same themes, which is I'll never vote for a tax increase, and we've got the best county commissioners working together. We've got a team up here, and well, I mean, you know, there's more than one way to put taxes on the taxpayers. You may recall the business incubation project, which Bill headed up several years ago. They went through $8 to $10 million worth of grants and taxpayer money. And then when they realized that gravy train would come to an end, they were $750,000 in debt, and they needed to turn out the lights. But they were a nonprofit, so they couldn't do a bankruptcy. So what they did was, Bill figured out some way to put all of this $750,000, first of all, onto the Port Angeles School District, and everybody knowing, the school district knowing, and Bill knowing that within 30, 45 days, they would transfer that over to the Clallam County taxpayers. And so that $750,000 left over, or excuse me, $750,000 in debt left over from the business incubation project, we now, as taxpayers, are paying back at a rate of $48,000 a year, and we have about 8 to 10 more years left to pay that, and that's not even including the interest. So that's a little bit of the issue I have with his continuation. Another one, he keeps talking about transparency. As some of you may know, if you were reading the protocol at that time, I went through asking about, there were 16 different documents about a $900,000 grant that came out of the county, official documents. 16 of them over 4 months. All of them were lies, bold-faced lies. They said that this money was going to build a Boys and Girls Club when it wasn't. But then after the 16th came out, and I finally asked Bill, aren't you concerned about these 16 different documents coming out that have completely erroneous, false information? Bill said, typographical error. Let's talk about the Carlsbad sewer When they were trying to get that $10 million to build a sewer that nobody wanted, that nobody needed, I was coming out in an opinion in the protocol saying, look, they got a real pressing need over Cloud Bay. They got, and CTU, they've got some real problems over there, and this $10 million can be better spent over there where they've got a real problem instead of throwing it in over here where there's no need and no desire. Well, now we have a $10 million sewer in Carlsberg. There are 96 people that have signed up on that sewer. So 10 million divided by 96 people, that's a lot of money for those people when it could have solved a lot of real problems over in Cloud Bay. Let's talk about homeless. Bill said something about I've voted for $50,000. Did that pass? Did that get funded? Okay. How much should we have spent? Because if you recall, in the last few weeks, 3 shelters at Serenity House have been closed. The night-by-night shelter, the family shelter, and the one that was probably the most effective of all, it had a drug counselor on hand, it had a drug testing on hand, and it had a very good functioning 12-step program on hand. All of those have been closed now. Now that's very important for another particular reason, especially those folks that are here from Jefferson County. One of the young men had some mental issues, but he had been coming and staying at the night-by-night shelter until it closed. He was left without anywhere to go, nobody to call upon. Somehow he made his way over to Jefferson County, made his way over to Port Townsend, got into a scrap with somebody over there and stabbed the guy in the head. So that's what they're trying to do here, is shuffle these homeless on down the street, let them be somebody else's problem. But folks, 85% of the people that Serenity House serves were born in Cloud County. These are our sons, these are our daughters, these are our people, and we can't just move them on down the road. We've got to solve this problem here.
Okay, any more questions for Mr. Woodell? Okay, all right, okay, so I'm going to go your 5 minutes.
Okay.
Okay,
I'll take up the chair.
I think it's never coming today.
Okay, some questions that I've been asked over the last few weeks, I guess, for the pleasure here. One is more of a comment and a question that a couple people have said it was in the paper time this way too, when I announced, according to the PDN, that I am a sort of against hydropower, or I don't like hydropower, and I don't either dislike it or like it. It's just a form of power, and it's a tool. And it's a means to an end. And like any tool, it can get dull, or it can get worn out, and it can get replaced by something better. And it's like a knife, too. You've got some knives that are better than others, and let's get rid of the dull ones, and let's put our money on the sharp ones. And so this is all about, figuring out the best approach of how to use the technology we have at the least cost and the most effective way. And what's crazy about all this is that the Northwest is one of the most blessed places when it comes to energy, because we have a lot of hydro, we now have a lot of wind, and we have the potential for a lot of solar. And we're not optimizing the mix of this stuff. And if we did, we could not only control our rates and cost increases, we could get them down. So that's one of the quick questions that I've dealt with. I guess another one is, one of the tribal councils, they recall, asked me when I briefed them Monday, they said, well, what would you do as the PUD commissioner? And I said, well, one of the things we've got to do is start working with other PUDs in a more proactive way to address bondable. And so that, again, is a way of addressing those external costs. More on the internal side of the question, so, is what do you do about resiliency in the county? And, like we have disaster and that kind of stuff. But once again, the solution is killing 2 birds with 1 stone here, because whatever we do for resiliency is also something that can help us reduce power costs now. When we better integrate our grid and be able to put more solar and wind and other things into the grid and use smart grid technology, we can actually be more effective now, but also be more resilient if there's power outages or anything like that. And for folks that live farther out to the west, this is a particular concern even today. When they have a power outage, it sometimes takes a long time for Bonneville to get there or the PUD to get there. So that's another one of those things that I think we have to, as a PUD commissioner, set of commissioners, have to come together on and figure out a better way and apply some fresh thinking to this, as opposed to the sort of just, as one guy said, the manager of the Cowlitz County PUD. The PUDs have basically just been pushing the happy button now for the last 25 or 30 years because Bonneville told them what to do and said, take our power, this is how much it costs, sign the contract, and oh, by the way, don't worry about those escalation clauses, and that's what's causing our rates to go up. So those are a couple of my questions.
Great, so I'm watching the time, and you have a question for which candidate?
For the PUD.
Mr. Whitmore. Oh, okay, go ahead.
Can you talk a little bit about how you'd incentivize solar panels? We have solar panels and we used to be able to get credits and now magically they dissolve the credits once a year.
Okay, I think your question was, the credits for solar have been discontinued or something?
Well, they wipe them off the books once a year and then
Oh,
start
yeah,
all
on
over.
April 30th. Yeah, I've been looking into that. It was kind of new to me too until a few months ago. And what I found is that April 30th cutoff is pretty standard with all the PUDs. I'm not surely why that's on the books, but it's pretty common. I guess the only good news there is that fortunately it's 30 April and not 30 September, because if it were, people like me and you with solar panels would be losing a lot of money because we would, have all that solar gain in the summertime. There's some other issues though, this net metering stuff that I think are peculiar to our PUD that deserve a real hard second look. Because the more I look at this, I don't understand the math on this thing. And they're going to have to explain to me why they call this a subsidy if you're for a person that's got solar panels. And I don't see it. And so, we got to dig into that, and that's one of the things I want to do.
So I'm looking at the time. At 7 o'clock, we have our next two candidates that will be speaking. So I thought it would be good to, as promised, each of the candidates can ask another candidate a question. And I think you can pick one candidate to propose your question to. So, Mr. Doherty, I'll let you go first if you would like to ask any of the other candidates.
I was going to ask it of both, but I guess I'll ask it of Bill if I have to. I prefer both. So my question is, there are some forums where local government elected officials get together. The principal one is the RC&D, the Resource Conservation Development Council. It's been around 15 years or so. Ports, cities, counties, tribes, and Jefferson and Clown get together once a month. It's a great opportunity to discuss issues and actually move towards some grants. And when I was chairman for over a decade, we did that. I'm curious how my opponents feel about that forum and why they haven't used that forum if they talk about collaboration, transparency, within public meetings, discussing interlocal cooperation, those sorts of things. I think Bill was a member for maybe a year, but why haven't you used that or shown any leadership in that group?
And his answer can be 2 minutes.
You gotta listen up, Dale. I'm gonna ask you the same question, okay? The answer is that organization does not exist. And what happened is a transformation of the organization. Jefferson County still meets and pulls together a lot of people. But that funding mechanism actually dissolved. So we ran into some interesting issues trying to get money that was due to that organization from the past. And boy, I'll tell you, that was a real workout. It took about 2 years worth of work. We finally, after a number of years, put our hands on the money, but that's not the primary source for that. It served more as an economic development team. They have tried a couple of things, stewardship with regard to conservation transactions. We've got some good people at the table. That's an expertise we have. But the RC&D that you were familiar with, the Forest Service doesn't provide the funding that used to be there.
So just technically, a correction, the RC&D does not exist, but the subsequent organization, the North Olympic Development Council, does the exact same thing. So Bill's uninformed. Mark Ozias has been chairman of that group and is very active, and the mayor of Port Townsend is the other co-chair. So they have used that group. And that group, I know we had grants, $15,000, $28,000, up to $1.6 million NASA grant. So it's still, for people in the audience, you can go to your board, your PUD, whatever, they still meet once a month. And it is a great forum for intergovernmental cooperation.
Okay, so Mr. Peach, you get to ask
Same question?
a question. Want to repeat it?
Please.
Your turn, Mike.
Mike asked the same question. I'd like to hear you ask it, Bill.
Can you explain to us what has occurred with the RCMD and what are they doing today?
You have 2 minutes to answer.
I'm going to do something you'll very rarely hear a candidate for office say. I'm ignorant about that subject. But I would say this. I was able to get through a master's degree in 1 calendar year. I'm a quick study. I don't have time to be up on all these arcane acronyms that flow so steadily off the tongue of people who have been in office for decades. But I do have a quick study, and I know how to sort through the useful information and to separate the wheat from the chaff. So when it comes time for me to be up to speed and make myself available to that type of learning, I will catch it. But let me add one more thing. Why do we have to keep depending on these grants? We've got so much beauty and so much bounty in this county. Why are we all, in every one of the grants that go out, we're listed as a distressed county? I'm not distressed. How many of you in here feel distressed? Me neither. So why are we telling ourselves that? We're not distressed. We have so much talent, and we have so much beauty, and we have so much bounty. We don't need to keep going after. We need to lift ourselves up by our own bootstraps, find the opportunities that are here, capitalize upon those opportunities that are here, get some people to get out of the way so that we can have entrepreneurs and CEOs to create jobs, and then we won't have to be running all over the place for more and more grants.
Okay, I think it's your turn to ask one candidate a question.
Mike, do you dye your hair?
2 minutes to discuss which hair dye. No, I don't. It's thinning, but it's all mine. I would use part of my time. There was one other question to me that I didn't have time to get to, and that was, would I promise to complete the term of office if elected, other than through illness, serious illness, or death? I'd avoid death and illness. I love this job. I love the people in the district, the geography of the district. I think it's the best commissioner district in the United States, and there's over 4,260, something like that, Ron, in the United States. How many other districts have a national park, a national forest, a national sanctuary, 3 Native American tribes, 1 related to Chalma, 2 to coastal Salish, and you have every possible political philosophy. I think Bill will agree to that. In the 3rd district, you got people on both extremes and extremes you never heard of. And people joke that as pioneers came west, they couldn't go any further because of the Pacific Ocean, so they settled in Clallam County. And if you remember, in 1854, Jefferson County, which was from where the east boundary is, throughout all of Clallam County, that was all Jefferson County, and in 54 they cut off and created Clallam County. The rumor was that so many people in western Clallam County that have all these weird philosophies will never please them. There was actually a Quileute County for 1 legislative session, down toward Quileute, Clearwater, down to Grays Harbor. The same session dissolved that county because there were people that couldn't get along. So it's a unique district. I was proud to serve it for years. People say I was everywhere all the time. I was eager to do that. I had over 250 meetings every year outside normal calendar meetings. So I was available. I loved it. I guess that's my 2 minutes.
Okay, and so, Mr. Liddell, you can use your 2 minutes however you like.
Wow, put me on the spot now. No questions. I don't do good without questions.
Talk about fuel cells.
Fuel cells. You want to talk about fuel cells? Fuel cells have been around for about 50, 60 years. The technology's been emerging for a long time. It's still pretty expensive, but it is being used in emergency applications, and as the price comes down, it too will become part of the mix of energy resources that we can have. Let's see, what else I might tell you. Electric vehicles. Yeah, okay, so that is, well, let's put it this way. The PUDs ought to be encouraging every form of renewable energy and anything that will reduce the carbon footprint and so forth like that. And so certainly electrical vehicles do that. And they also, you know, This is where solar becomes pretty handy because that becomes a source for charging electric vehicles and so forth. And we can localize, like particularly in the swim area, a lot of solar, and that's going to help electric fleets, particularly municipal fleets in that area. And so I would certainly, want to see that as well, for developing whatever the PUDs can do to stimulate that, that would be great. But I think the PUD really needs to stimulate solar use and be more forward in being progressive about it as opposed to being so negative and kind of making jokes about it all the time in the commission meetings, like they made it Mike when he was there a few months ago when we mentioned it. So anyway, I think that's an attitude change that needs to take place in the PUD. Certainly about that. So, thank you.
Jim's got 30 seconds left, so I'm going to comment you there for a second. I failed to mention a couple of things. I want to thank the Sons of Norway for allowing us to be here. I want to thank the Progressives for sponsoring this. I want to thank Jordan Campbell. Jordan Campbell is going to be up here one day, I promise you, as we pass the torch to the next group of leaders. Jordan Campbell is the only one in Clallam County who has been nominated for a total of 3 Emmy Awards. They haven't brought home the hardware yet, but he and his crew captured the homecoming game. They did some PSAs for the city, and they have a phenomenal group that are studying under Patrick McInnes, who is the president of PAPA. So it won't be long before Jordan Campbell will be up here with us. So Jordan, thank you for what you're doing tonight.
And do if the other candidates make a closing statement too, if they like.
I think Sons of Norway very much. I never forget when I was managing timberlands here for Rainier, getting this nasty letter from a park, because every year we actually hired volunteer organizations, the swimming club, the basketball, any kind of group in high school to go out and brush up the road. Because Rainier had a road that was within 5 feet of the park fountain. Very popular if you've ever been out to the Norwegian Monument. Needless to say, we didn't really respond to the letter, and for some reason this sort of forgot. The fact is, I really do appreciate what I've learned at the meeting tonight. And I've got a website, I've got some of the questions in my pocket that I didn't get a chance to answer. I look forward to answering them. And I ask you to think about the approach that you're seeing each candidate take, and whether that approach is going to represent your interests. I'm not here to represent a special interest group or a party. I work for you. Thank you.
So I encourage you to go to my website, and again, the little green card will get you the URL. There's a couple of, one item in the back at least, touch a little bit about why I'm running, and we'll just develop more if I survive the primary. There are a couple of League of Women Voter candidate forums coming up next week, the 16th and the 18th. First is Port Angeles and Esquima. I encourage you to go there. You can provide other questions to candidates, try to put us on the spot. It's stimulating when you do that. I'd also encourage you to look beyond just the wording, but there's some emphasis on my website of what I would be active on coming up in the future. And I proved the level of activity because of what I did in the past. So I'm very proud of my record. I think, again, our board was more active when Behringer, Chapman, and myself were on the board. Again, we were fiscally responsible. We had great morale. We acknowledged employees more. We featured employees more. For instance, on climate change, 25 employees stepped up and started to work on a climate action plan. We were at step 3 of one of the models that has 5 steps. When there was a shift in the Board of Commissioners, Mr. McIntyre didn't support that. Mr. Peach, until just recently, 3.5 years, still didn't support planning for climate change. Said he read a book and it had nothing applicable to climate change impacts in the Pacific Northwest. So I'm grateful he's encouraging me converting to the faith, and the board is going to work on climate change items. But it's a deficiency, and as Michael Bloomberg says, there's billions and billions of dollars are at stake as we do not address the impacts of climate change. So it's just one of those items that the board isn't working on. I've gone twice to recommend the board get involved in net neutrality. The board hasn't done that. The result would be, with the shift in the FCC, net neutrality being put away, means that rural areas will have less broadband investment. If you really want jobs, you need a remote fast broadband in our remote areas. We also need to be looking forward to 5G networks. Those are going to go into the urban areas. We should try to get one here. Thanks.
Thank you all very much. So, because it's around 7 o'clock and we're finished, and so let's give a big hand of applause for our and we'll ask Gigi to come up. Our next candidate is Jennifer Gigi Ferguson, and I'm going to let her introduce herself. And since we're shifting into the next section of our forum, I just wanted to let Gigi know, welcome by the way, that we're doing 10 minutes uninterrupted presentation. And we have someone who's going to tell you within about 5 minutes, 1 minute, and then please finish. And then if anybody has questions for Gigi, we're going to encourage you to write them down. We'll gather the questions, and then Tyler Vegas is going to be our next presenter. And so you'll be able to look at the questions while he's presenting, okay? So everyone, this is our candidate for U.S. Senate.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me this year. A lot of people, I'm Jennifer Gigi Ferguson, and we've come up from Tacoma. A lot of people ask me, why are you running for U.S. Senate? I've thought about growing up, the same issues my grandmother was fighting for, the same issues my cousins went to jail for, the same issues that I was bussed out of the black community into the white community for, the same issues that President John F. Kennedy and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. were killed for, we're still dealing with today. We are still dealing with segregation, lack of education, poverty, and wars for profit. Why? Because we have two corporations that are running our country. The Democratic National Convention, in a lawsuit with the Bernie Crowds, actually admitted they are a corporation. They are a private corporation. And no one has the right to ask them for any of their information. And they do not have to follow their own bylaws. These are important documents. There's a lot of other things in there, but it really started me thinking based on also hearing and being told we will keep our incumbents in office by any means necessary. Knowing what I have been through personally, running for office, any means necessary means any means necessary. And it's not nice. We had in 1970, minimum wage stopped. Prior to 1970, we had the minimum wage and the cost of living adjustment, both were on the same slope upward. They moved together. Social Security was balanced. In 1970, when Congress stopped raising the minimum wage, then we began to see the slope going like this. Most people believe we're looking at Poverty. Executives to entry-level people would be 25-1 if we are looking at an executive making $250,000 a year and an entry-level person making $11,000 a year. How many believe that's what we have? Any ideas of what you think we have if you don't think it's 25-1?
300.
Okay, 300-1. Anyone else?
224.
489-1. Executives are making 489% more than entry-level workers. Is there a reason now why we have a problem with homelessness? Is there a reason we're having problems with poverty? Is there a reason why we're having a lot of issues? And I look at things systemically. I have a master's in psychology with an emphasis in marriage and family therapy. I'm a chemical dependency counselor as well. I love people. I love working with people. I love research. And therefore, I've done a lot. I knew nothing. I am not a politician. I knew zero about politics when I started this. I didn't know how to get on a ballot. I didn't even know where to go to get on a ballot. However, I have been volunteering in the communities for over 40 years, starting in my junior high years. And the governor of Illinois appointed me to a position over an entire county for an Illinois Youth Traffic Safety Conference. I worked in that county as his liaison, and they still had on their books blacks had to be out of town by sundown. So to give you a little history, if you don't know who I am, being Jennifer Gigi Ferguson, I was born in the projects in Chicago with a midwife and my mother. I had a baby brother that died before I was 5. My mother died of cancer before I turned 8, 6 months after being diagnosed. My father had to adopt me. He was not ready to have a child. And we were, in today's times, considered homeless. I didn't know that. I had a bed, but my dad was sleeping on the sofas as we moved around. He finally put me with my grandmother until he had a job and was stable and we were able to move. He had me in the busing program. So I was this black child being bused into the white schools. That's a blessing because I understand both sides. I've lived both sides. And I will not forget both sides. With my degree, I chose to get a contract, start a nonprofit, and get a contract with the state, working with families who've lost their children to the state. I could be their mother, I could be their grandmother, or I could be the biggest pain in their butt. Because I believe children need to be with their parents if we can get their parents where they need to be. And I was one of those. I was on 24-hour call, and I may stop at your house at any time, listen in the door if there's noise. I want to know what's going on. I'm used to fighting for people's rights. I'm used to standing up, and sometimes being the only one standing, but it doesn't stop me. My running for U.S. Senate is not about me. It's about all of us. It's about where I see the United States going. And everything I've seen and read, people in the United States want the same things. The problems are how we're going to get there and how we get the corporations out of those legislators who have been bought and sold and owned. And nothing is going to change as long as we have legislators who are being paid by pharmaceutical companies, by the oil companies, and by the other companies. Nothing will change. And both sides are doing the same thing. Listen and watch. There's certain issues you will see being fought. And when they really want either side that issue to get through, they fight. When they don't really want that issue to get through, you don't hear a word from the other side. Last thing I want you to think about, Washington State has been a Democratic state since 1980. Democrats have been in power. Democrats are the people, they're supposed to be for the people. If they've been in power, that means they've been controlling the money, they've been controlling our environment, they've been controlling basically the House and the Senate. If they're for us, why is it our unions have lost so much ground? Why do we have so much homelessness? Why do we have a problem with drug epidemics? Why is sex trafficking #1 in the state of Washington in the whole world? We can't keep this up. So I'm running as an independent because when I begin to act out, still being a lady, I don't want the Republicans telling the Democrats, shut her down. And then they shut me down. As an independent, they can't do that. I have 2 websites. It's by accident, but I'd like to give it to you. And I will have cards. It's ggforsenate.us, and that's us, or the United States. And that's GIGIFOR Senate.us. And the other one is votejenniferggggferguson.com. I thank you. And if you have any, and I am an open book. I'm very touchable. My business card has my phone number that's in my pocketbook. I thank you for your time.
If anyone has questions for Gigi, be sure to write them down. Anybody need blank cards? We have more if you need more index cards. Okay, and so next, we're going to have a candidate for U.S. Representative, Tyler Miles Davis.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Tyler Vega. You can find me on the web, tylervega.com. Real simple. I prefer direct contact that has multiple channels. I ran originally in 2016 for a very specific reason. I saw stadiums filling up with young people younger than me, for Bernie Sanders. And I was like, wow, so I guess the young people do give her a ballot. That's incredible. Why hasn't that happened? I ran a campaign in 2004, a long time ago, right out of college, and gave up pretty quickly because there's no support, there's no way, there's just no way. The older generation wanted nothing to do with me, and the young people were just like, yeah, no way, man. I'm sorry, there's no way. And eventually I figured out why, and there were a lot of reasons why, but the really big one was that it's been rigged. And as Gigi mentioned, the DNC actually has admitted in court that they did rig the 2016 primaries. We know how, we know why, it's all flat out there. And hilariously, this concept of the superdelegate. I assume everybody in the room knows what a superdelegate is. Please ask if you don't. In 1984, the title of George Orwell's book, the superdelegate comes back to America and rigs every presidential primary in my lifetime, with the exception of one. Reagan versus Carter was technically not rigged. Everyone since then has been rigged. And everybody knows it. This is the information age. I always had access to the internet. Since I could move my fingers, I could access information. And this was true of my entire generation. You can't pull one over on everybody anymore like you could through the entire 20th century, in fact the entire second millennium. you could basically lie your way to the top. And we see the fallout from that all around us. But that age is gone now. You just can't do this. The truth is going to surface. This is the information age, and stuff doesn't stay under rocks anymore. So the superdelegates, if anybody's following it, just last week are effectively a thing of the past. I mean, they still exist in round 2. They can still have a vote, but basically we won that battle. We were able to enter the Democratic Party and make enough change at the grassroots level that come 2020, the people will actually get to choose who the Democratic nominee is. For the first time in my life, the people will choose who will run as a Democrat. The gravity of this statement is just mind-bending. So I'm a Democrat and a progressive. Like Gigi, I'm running outside the Democratic Party on the top of the ticket, or second from the top of the ticket. I'm running with the Progressive Party, which is a party of a couple of dozen people. And I did that on purpose. I did that on purpose because my opponent is and was a superdelegate and made his choice in 2016, which resulted in a particular nominee, which resulted in the current situation. Everybody is pissed, obviously, and I'm not going to dwell too much on the past, other than to say that it was a required move that we fix that problem. It was absolutely required, and there are a lot of problems that are required to be fixed. But we won on the superdelegates, and that is my humble explanation for why I run outside the party. I'm also a Democrat. I show up to meetings and I vote, and I've been asked to be on the e-board if the Bernie-crats take the Central Committee, and I will take that happily. The nature of a two-party system already puts a person like me at this massive disadvantage that most people don't even take a candidate seriously. That's fine. That's not a problem for me. That will change in our lifetimes. In my lifetime, that will change. We will see the end of the duopoly regardless. It's just a matter of time. The question is, will it be this year? Will it be 2 cycles from now, 4 cycles from now? Of course, I'm planning to win this time, and I'm looking for support for that. That's why I'm here. But what I'm really here to say is, look at the change we have coming about. Look at the fact that we just beat the superdelegates last week. That is incredible. And when you consider who you vote for, all the way down the ticket, remember that in some cases, for example, Gigi and I, you're not voting for a person, but a movement. I'm a tiny facet of a movement. I'm the founder of the Washington Bernie-crats Coalition. We're all ages, all genders, you can say that these days. Every nationality you can imagine, and sweeping, this incredible breadth of generation, from people who can't even vote yet to people who are, double my age. And I'm 42. Yeah, we have some that are double my age and greater plus. So that's a beautiful thing. We are uniting all of these disparate parts, and we are also divided. We have incredible divisions happening. We have, the war inside the Democratic Party is no joke. I'm sure everybody in the room is familiar with how difficult life is inside politics these days. That's necessary. These are growing pains. This is what we have to go through to fix things. We have been living a lie for my entire life. Literally living a lie in politics for my entire life. And it's time to change that. We are changing. So, so much to talk about. It's incredible. 10 minutes is so much time. I've never had a long enough spot to speak that I might actually get to all the points. So I'm going to try and get to where am I? How am I doing? 5 minutes, great. So 2016, I ran specifically to oppose superdelegates and to create a space for all the people that were displaced in politics. Most of my generation, in fact, all of my generation, barring the few and the brave warriors who have become the Dem Enter movement, basically have no place in politics. So I set out to challenge you superdelegates and to create a space for my own generation and for the generations Y and Z and the millennials. And that became the Washington Bernie-crats Coalition. We crossed many boundaries. We are Greens, we are Democrats, we are progressives, socialist alternative. Basically all of these many faceted groups that comprise the conscious left who are trying to make a difference but can't hang with the Democratic Party. So then the conversation became, how do we be effective in politics? Well, you got to work with the Democratic Party and outside. So there's this two-pronged approach of being the inside path and the outside path. So many of us are inside the Democratic Party, are also running in, working with a progressive party or a Democratic Socialist Party or a Green Party or something like that. And these are all really beautiful things because it brings people together and it shows us our differences, and we can still agree on a bunch of stuff. Like every time I go to a hardcore Dem Enter movement meeting, the platform is the same. The difference is how we're going to get there and who we're going to put on the face of it. And we had this great victory a couple of weeks ago, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, beats the number 4 Democrat in the country as basically a democratic socialist. We know that this is a real thing now. That socialism, everybody's afraid of the word socialism, but we are already a socialist country. Capitalism and socialism are not mutually exclusive. It's not that they're actually mutually inclusive. They are a spectrum, and we are just right of center. I think that just dispelling the fear of that word was the great gift that Bernie Sanders brought to the table, because everybody started to realize, oh wait, we already have welfare. Oh wait, we already have public schools. Oh wait, we already have Medicare. Oh yeah, we are already a socialist country. What was the problem? What was ever the problem? The problem was that some really, really rich people didn't want to lose their power and would do anything to stop it. So there was a propaganda war over spanning some of all of your lifetimes, well beyond my lifetime, that literally brainwashed people. Anyway, you can't get away with that anymore because the internet has destroyed it. You put something like that in front of me, and I spent 5 minutes on Google, and it's gone. It's done. It's done. Just totally gone. So now we have the superdelegates conversation resolving beautifully. We have the duopoly is resolving in Vermont. As we speak, we have a 3-party system in Vermont. You guys know this? In Vermont, there are 3 parties: the Progressive Party, the Democratic Party, and the Republican Party. And they work. They're not perfect, but they work it out. And the Progressive Party kind of checks the Democratic Party, and they have this almost parliamentary idea going on. They just, they have the governor is a member of the Progressive Party. So we're moving towards what is becoming the world norm in the first world, which is a parliamentary system. So that in such a complex country, everybody has a place, and all those places check and balance one another. The only real problem with American politics is that the people got disillusioned and checked out. My generation, done. We were gone. And once we realized we were being screwed, we checked out, didn't come back basically until a couple of years ago. We came back for Obama and then felt like we got screwed again, so left again. But they're back and still trying, still kicking hard. And as we progress forward, we're going to find more and more that all we really need is civic engagement at all levels. And we need to use the tools we've got, including the internet, including social media, and the ability to bridge the gap. Not just the generation gap, not just not just reaching. We're not just talking about reaching across the aisle from Democrat to Republican anymore. We're talking about reaching across the aisle from Green Party through the Dems. And I got to first. It's hard for me to agree with the Dems than it is to agree with Republicans at this point in my life. That's just because there's this anti-corruption thing that is going on. So we got to find common ground here. Then we got to talk to the Republicans, which gets real complicated. Then you got to get over to the Libertarians and the Constitution Party on the far end of that in order to really get anything done in this world. And so that's the age we live in. The duopoly, this whole 2-party system is the sham of the second millennium. We are in the 3rd millennium now. That shit's over. Sorry, pardon the language. I know I'm a candidate, I'm not supposed to do that. Fortunately, my kids are in the back of campus. I think I'm out of time. Am I out of time? Okay, my name is Tyler Vega, tylervega.com. Please find me on Facebook. Just message me. I'll make time for you. That's all I got as far as time. Yes, ask me questions.
So both Gigi and Tyler can come on up. And so, has anyone written down any questions for Tyler? We'll gather written questions first. And do we have any questions, Marie, or? No? Okay. Okay, so I do have one question for both of them. Sit wherever you like. I think this is the better microphone. Okay, the question that was written before either of you even got here. This is written, one of the first questions that came in. For Jennifer Ferguson and Tyler Vega, will you support health care for all Americans if elected?
Yeah.
You have 2 minutes to answer.
I mean, that's just a yes. The answer is yes. 2 minutes on that, I'll expand. Yeah, I've been very active with I-1600 Whole Washington, and actually my only regret about running for office this year is that I couldn't do that full time, and I would have happily done that full time, gathering signatures. Very, very close with that entire crew. And I mean, what else? I don't know if there's more to say about that other than that it's a no-brainer for me. I know that for example, my opponent backs the ACA, and I think that is a baby step in the right direction, but it's still run by for-profit corporations, and the dollar is still more important than your healthcare. So it's doomed to fail from the beginning, and we need a better system. It has to be a system that puts the healthcare above the dollar. It's really as simple as it gets. I've worked in healthcare most of my life. My father is a doctor. He remarried a doctor 10 years ago, and I've worked as their medical assistant in the field. I've had the conversation way too many times where I had to speak to a patient saying, look, I'm sorry, you can't come see your doctor anymore because we can't, there's no way we're going to get paid, and we can't keep our doors open unless we have to refer you to somebody who does take your insurance, which there is nobody. There literally is nobody. And I had to tell a bunch of people that myself, and that sucks. So, yes.
I'm sorry, the way I was raised, you just don't talk to people sitting down. That's just me. So, yes, and I have been endorsed by DUH, Demand Universal Healthcare for All. I also did a lot, I think I did about 9 or 10 forms for I-1600. Wish I could have done more, but I did what I could while I was campaigning. Losing my mom to cancer, losing my baby brother, working with people that are in poverty, working with people who make 10 cents more than what they can qualify for insurance. To me, there's no other way. And people look at this as socialism and they compare it to the VA. My husband is a veteran. He was a 22-year Vietnam vet. I have a son that served in Iraq, and I have a son currently serving, and my Mother's Day present was they brought him in off the DMZ in South Korea. I know the military and their medical system, and I can tell you, the VA may not be the best, but they do a doggone good job with the active duty military and their families. And people need to look at that system before they say no. Thank you.
Senator, I think we have about 10 minutes to ask these two candidates questions. So if you want to just, you want to say it out loud or?
This is mostly for Tyler, but
Okay.
both get popular.
Yeah, so the question is, say more about when were the super delegates was abolished? So,
Yeah, whatever you just.
So they weren't actually abolished. As I understand it, through this process I've become friends with people on all sides of this conversation, and so I'm exploring the conversation with people who are very hardcore on both sides. From what I would call the far left, the people are saying it's just not enough. There are two angles on the left. One is that it's a step in the right direction, but it's a farce. They're still going to be able to vote. They're going to figure out some way to trick us again. And then medium left, they're saying that it's a band-aid, that they couldn't change the actual bylaws. So this was a way to make sure that the 2020 cycle was dealt with, and we will get a fair vote in 2020, and that going forward we'll have to fix it. We'll have to do a better fix later. And then from the kind of more centrist approach, they're saying it's a very good thing. This creates a situation where the people will get a fair vote, but the superdelegates will still get to throw their weight behind their candidate. So superdelegate will still have a vote, but it won't mean anything, but they can still be seen as voting for this person.
So where did this happen?
Where did it happen? As I understand, the meeting was actually online, which is also a historical event.
The Washington State Democrats or what?
This is a national thing. And so there are representatives from every state, and ours are, I think we had 3 people. David McDonald, the lawyer on Grange versus Washington is one, and I can't rattle off the names, but this was a DNC-wide decision by which the delegates were denied, no longer have the power to vote in the first round of the presidential nomination, which is the significant round. So they will have the power to vote in the second round. So if there are multiple candidates, which is likely, we might see superdelegates in 2020, but if the people are wildly in favor of one candidate as they were in 2016, then that person will, in theory, proceed to the general election.
I just want to add, how many people know why we actually have superdelegates? Okay, the reason we have superdelegates is because the Democratic Party did not like who the people selected twice.
It's to stop Jimmy Carter.
So the superdelegates were created to go over our vote. One man, one vote, one woman, one vote, one person, one vote. We need to get rid of them altogether. And they have superdelegates who are lobbyists that we have not even elected to be in office. They need to go. They should have been gone. And that is an issue I shall work on.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else want to ask questions? If we don't have any specific questions, what we'll do is we'll give each candidate about 5 more minutes to speak. Okay, so Tyler?
Wow, there's so much time happening. So luxurious, this world, there is never time. It's great. I'm a father, my kids are out there playing with Courtney's kids. And time is such a remarkably scant thing these days. Tell you a little bit about my where I'm coming from, who I am. I live in Port Townsend. I'm a computer tech. I run networks for people like Holy Cap here in PA and the office and all over the place offices, and do basically systems, keeping systems stable. And that is one of the things we're going to have to do. We're going to have to learn how to get into the information age with our government, with our voting systems. Our voting systems are questionable and at best, and we have the technology now to make them secure and provably secure. So that's one of the things that we're working hard on. You'll hear this concept of blockchain, and you'll hear things like open source. Open source and blockchain are the two elements to a secure online voting system. It can be done, it should be done, and it will make it possible for everybody to participate in a very, and suddenly we're going to see civic engagement on a whole new level. These are the kinds of things that that herald a new America, because you can't keep the old America. It's not. It's in the past. We're just like a crumbling mass of madness trying to figure out who we are right now. I want to touch on the actual reason I came back in 2018 was there were a lot of reasons. People demanded it, to be honest, but there was the thing that tipped the scales was this lawsuit. I wonder, I won't ask it that way. I will present to you a fact that nobody knows. That the Bill of Rights, these 10 amendments, there were originally 12, and there was one in front of all 10 of them, the original First Amendment. Anybody in the room know that there was a First Amendment before the First Amendment? Okay, so there was a First Amendment before the First Amendment, now known as the Congressional Apportionment Amendment. This was the real deal. We had just fought the war of independence, and we fought it over the issue of representation. And everybody knew at the time that if we didn't protect the people's voice in the government, we're going to get screwed, and this is going to become an oligarchy, which is what happened. So the original First Amendment was to do with representation and the people's representation in Congress. And we had some problems because we had slavery to deal with. We had the fact that women couldn't vote. In fact, nobody could vote except for wealthy white men. So we couldn't resolve the problem because the South wanted slaves, the North didn't, and we had to figure out how we were going to count slaves, even though people didn't know whether we were even going to call black people, like humans. Please punch me later. Gigi, I go way back. Fact is fact. We had real problems, and it took until now. We are still, as Gigi said, we are still dealing with those problems right now. Anyway, so the real First Amendment, the original First Amendment, the Congressional Apportionment Amendment, was eventually ratified. In fact, twice in history was ratified, but never enacted. And it was never enacted for a reason. Our House of Representatives has been capped at 434 people for 100 years for a very good reason. Because a small house is easy to buy, and a big congressional district like this one is very difficult for a populist candidate to win. So it was done on purpose, and it was stifled on purpose so that the people's voice in Congress could never exist again. The original First Amendment guaranteed us one representative for every 50,000 persons. Right now it's almost 10 times that. This district, I think, has 450,000 people. So one person, my opponent, is expected to represent the views of 450,000 people. Our forefathers saw that coming and said, no, it's got to be, people need to be able to access their representatives so that they will have a voice in Congress. The original First Amendment, aka Article the First, aka the Congressional Apportionment Amendment, was that, and it stated that. There's a lawsuit going to the Supreme Court as we speak called Laverne versus the U.S. House of Representatives, and it brings this back to the table and puts the data, which in the information age is loud and clear, right there. It was ratified, never enacted. The law of the land was ratified, not enacted. We should have that number of people. And so that got me really excited because I said, oh wow, if that actually happens, the people could reinsert their voices into Congress. And I'm like, wow, and how would we even do that? What would we do if the House of Representatives suddenly multiplied by 8? How would we even deal with that? Well, we have the technology. We just got to solve that problem. We've got the people. The people care now all of a sudden. We're selling out stadiums when Bernie comes to town. We're selling out stadiums. We've got the people who know how to use their devices. I can put 1,000 people on a call right now with 2 clicks of a button. We have the infrastructure. And at that point, you would be able to call me, and I could answer the phone and say, yeah, how should I vote on this bill? And that's how it's supposed to be. That's how it was designed to be. And that's how the Constitution was written. So that's my last piece, is that Article the First is a real thing. Within our lifetimes, this will come to the table again. This will become common knowledge. The invisible original First Amendment is a real thing, and it really matters. I'm Tyler Bacon, the Constitution.
First, let me ask, are there any questions that people have of me that you didn't write down? Because often, people have things in their mind, but they really don't say it, and they leave and think, why didn't I ask? So I want you to ask. Because one, running in the position that I have run, there have been so many lies put on me. They can't find anything that I've done, so they create it. And so I want to know if there was anything, because I am so transparent. When I was at Madigan, I volunteered at Madigan for 2,200 hours with our soldiers coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan in less than 13 months. I left that position with secondary trauma. And so I'm also very, very aware of secondary trauma with family members, the wives and the children of people who have served overseas. And so when I say I know the true cost of war, I do. I flew in the other night, and this is something I haven't told, and it's just how the dots connected. I was so busy, I hadn't eaten, which is really why I stay plus size, because I get so busy I forget about food. I haven't had anything to eat since sometime yesterday, which is why you saw me eating, because I've been busy. I've been trying to get my FEC. And I sent my husband a text. I was on the airplane, getting ready to fly home from California. And I said, baby, please give me something to eat. I haven't eaten since 7:30 last night. And this was 5 o'clock. The way things went, he ended up just pulling into Applebee's in University Place. And when he pulled in, he said, get it to go. Well, there you have to sit at the bar, get your food from the bar. So I ordered, and I was sitting. And I don't know how I paid attention to the man next to me. He had the military hat on. My husband is really into now his Vietnam era hat with all of his stuff on it. And I looked at the gentleman and I said, which battle are you in? And he looked at me like, I said, sir, I can't see the top of your hat. And so he said, Iraqi freedom. So we began to have a conversation, found out he was in Afghanistan, told him how I volunteered, and he says, well, I'm really glad no one in my unit had to do that. Red flag. Every 2 weeks when I volunteered in the intensive outpatient program at Madigan, does anyone remember in 2012 when they had the big investigation into Madigan for the PTSD program? I'm the one that brought that to Norm Dix because I was angry they shut the program down. And so I began to talk with him because I knew that could not be right. And I found out he was divorced. His children couldn't see him. His grandchildren couldn't see him. Most of his family had abandoned him, and so had his friends, because of his nightmares and because of his outbursts. And I began to talk with him, and I began to tell him what's available to him. I began to educate him on what was going on in his life. And when I got ready to leave, I said, "Sir, I hope I've given you some information to help you to feel better and to get what you need. Because where you are, 30% disability is ridiculous." He said, "Ma'am, I was going to have 3 more drinks and go home and kill myself." He said, "You saved my life." War is real. The after effects are real. And we need someone in the U.S. Senate who understands the true cost of war. And I am that person. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord. We have a question.
Yes, I have a question for both of you. I'm curious, have either of you ever heard of a woman named Deborah as an author? Obviously not. She lived in Washington State and she wrote a book called Black Box Voting. I suggest both of you read it. It has to do with technology throwing elections. And she analyzed the Gore Bush election in 2000, the election where Gore actually won and lost the election. Read the book. It touches on the stuff you're both talking about.
She was in Belgium, and there have been people trying to connect. It's trying to happen, really.
Okay, well, thank you both so much. I think we have 1 or 2 or 3 more local candidates that wanted to speak. Is that right? Do we have the local candidates that want to speak with their hands up? If not, we'll have a little bit more time with these 2. Yes, Rachel.
Hi, I'm on the campaign for Susan Hayden's campaign for District Court 1. She wasn't able to be here today, but I did leave information over there, and if you have any questions, you can come and talk to me, and I can fill you in on those things. So if you'd like to learn more about that, that information is here. I can point you in the directions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Okay, I guess we can go from.
Since I didn't see
5 more minutes.
Really quick, I wanted to say, I am not going after corporations. I do not take corporate money. And this may sound however you take it, I don't care. But I refuse to be a slave to a corporation, and I refuse to be a slave to a party. I want to work and continue working for the people. And therefore, our campaign is run on individual contributions, small business contributions, and so is Tyler. We're both against the oil and the big pharma, and understand one of the big reasons I became really upset with our senators, and I'm not one to run dirty politics, but when you have senators who vote against negotiating lower price prescription drugs, and you're out feeding people, and you have disabled older people tell your church, you're angels. We were eating cat food and dog food. Now you're allowing us to eat food. I was furious. I looked all through that bill to see if maybe there was some pork in there that they were trying to protect us from. It wasn't. We're fighting, and I've been fighting the LNG in Tacoma, the no methanol. I was all over down Western Washington fighting no DAPL for North Dakota because the water, we cannot replenish our water. We cannot replenish our land. Yet, one of our senators co-sponsored a bill to increase fracking and make it easier to frack. The only way they can work that LNG plant in Tacoma is fracking. So we need to really look at, not just listen to what our elected officials tell us. We need to pick up and look at the bills they're voting for. My experience is on my website. It speaks for me. My resume is even cut to about a fourth on my website. Read. You will see my heart, you will see me, and you will see what I've been doing my life. And it's been about people. It's not about money. I'm not going to be bought. I'm going to change. And I've asked people that have known me, do you think I get into the Senate, I'm going to change? And people who have known me for years have said no. My stepmother is an evangelical. We have our differences. And when I was originally running as a Democrat, she refused to give me her name. But she went into prayer, and God said, when has Gigi ever allowed anyone to tell her to do something that was wrong, and she didn't? And she couldn't. He said, then why aren't you supporting her? And she sent me a check. That is integrity. And that's what I have, and that's what I will be for you and representing you in Washington, D.C. as your U.S. Senator. I thank you.
I feel like I've said, I mean, there's so much to say, but yeah, I mean, I appreciate a lot having enough time to really stretch out. That's really nice. I mean, the only thing that comes to mind to add to what's been said is, let's do this. So I know that everybody in the room is here because you care. You're the preaching the choir of just being up here. You wouldn't be here if you hadn't been paying attention and probably outraged. So I guess I just ask that you take the time, especially right now the primary is coming in Washington State. You vote in the primary, the general is almost a sham. They've already, it's two corporate guys generally speaking at that point. So the real deal happens in the next 3 weeks. So if you would, take the time to open a Twitter account and invite your contacts to it. Open, there are 20,000 platforms out there, and you can make a real big difference. One person can make such an impact, and it doesn't have to be for me, but check out these incredible candidates around. I mean, besides Gigi and I, look just across the water. You've got Sarah Smith. They're calling her the next Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. MK2, and you've got Tambourine Borelli in the south, and Dorothy Gasquet in the deep south. They're really incredible candidates, and everybody in this room, 6 degrees of separation to everybody on the planet. It's like 3 to everybody in your congressional district. A single share of Facebook page can be astronomical in this age because things are changing so fast. And the difference between whether we have a majority of people who are pro-war in Congress this year and in 2020 could be the difference between whether or not our children survive. So please take the time, please bear with the madness of the world and the famous orangutan Cheeto head. We'll get past this. We're getting past this. We are getting past this. Stick with it. Open a Twitter account and find who you like and blast about them in the next couple of days. Thanks for your time on Saturday.
I think this concludes our gathering tonight, so thank you so much for coming on behalf of the Olympic Peninsula Progressives. If you haven't signed in, I meant to reiterate that if you put your email address, I will send you an email with a link to this event once we get it from Papa. So, please feel free to sign. People get real legible. It's hard sometimes to read email addresses, so So if you leave your phone number also, I can call you if I can't, I don't know if the email address. Thanks again to everybody. Thanks, Marcia, our timekeeper. Oh, I must say.
How are you doing? Hopefully, have some stuff.
Any given night.